Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Blue Raider Podcast, hosted by Jake Bolden and sponsored by the Conseco Group General Contracting. Don't miss another Tuesday episode by subscribing to the podcast on all streaming platforms or catch our visual presentation uploaded every week on YouTube. Don't miss our upcoming ticket giveaways by subscribing and following on all Blue Raider Podcast social media accounts on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Blue Raider Pod. Welcome back to another episode of the Blue Raider Podcast. I'm your host, Jake Bolden, and I've got an exciting episode planned for you today as I break down the Blue Raiders' trip to Oxford with staff writer Sam Doughton and look forward to this weekend's much-anticipated 100 Miles of Hate matchup with WKU with our Conference USA Roundtable partner, as well as College Huddle partner in the Topper Talk, Stephen Moffett. And then stick around. In between there, we have an interview with one of my favorite so far player interviews I've done thus far is with Villanova-transfer middle blocker Kiera Booth. A lot of fun talking with her, get to know a little bit about her story as well as her upcoming season here in Murfreesboro, her final season that is. So great interview there. I encourage you to stick around and listen to get to know a little bit more about Kiera. And then before we roll into our first interview with Sam Doughton, I want to take a minute and talk about our sponsor of the podcast, the Conseco Group. As some of you may have caught at the beginning of last week's episode, we are proudly sponsored by the Commercial General Contracting Group based out of Nashville. The Conseco Group has been in operations for over 35 years, serving the Middle Tennessee area, and one thing that makes them different from other general contracting firms is their developer mindset and years of expertise. Just understand that when you choose the Conseco Group, you're not only getting that competent attention to detail you want, but you're getting a company that understands every dollar you put into your project matters as it does to them as well. So take the time to visit their website at consecogroup.com. That's CONSECO group.com to see some of their most recent work or call their office at 615-298-9907 to schedule an appointment with the lovely staff located there in Berry Hill in South Nashville. Now, it's time to roll into our first interview. And as I teased there at the very beginning, joining me today is staff writer for GoBlueRaiders.com and MTSU Athletics Communication, the always lovely Sam Doughton. He's made it back from Oxford, I assume, unscathed.
Jake, thanks for having me on. Excited to be on the new and improved, new look Blue Raider Pod in season 2 here. First football season for you with this fully operational, I believe. But lots of exciting stuff happens. Kiara's gotten off to a great start with volleyball. I really enjoyed watching her play this weekend and sort of the Blue Raider Bash that they played here in Murfreesboro. Very powerful middle hitter for the team. So exciting stuff there. Looking forward to hearing your interview later on when this is all uploaded.
Absolutely. And as we talked about there, Sam made the trip from Oxford. And before we kind of roll into breakdown, you were there, you were on the scene at Ole Miss. But before we get to your breakdown of it, I want to hear just a little bit of message from Coach Derek Mason and his post-game opening statements.
For us, this football team went out and played a really good Ole Miss football team. And so first of all, I got to give credit to Ole Miss. And they're good, they're physical, and they're talented, and across the board in all 3 phases. And for our football team, I thought we learned a lot about ourselves. This is a game that's got to be played, and with that, man, there's opportunities to get better. I wanted to see us sort of withstand the first wave, man, because there's always that 8 to 10 minutes in a ball game where we see this wave, especially for a non-ranked team playing a ranked team sometimes, and what you have to do is swim through it. And I just didn't think we handled that very well initially. Didn't play a great first half, but what I will tell you is that I believe that this football team got better. I think there's some things about itself that it learned here at Ole Miss that I think we can take into a schedule, man, that doesn't get easier per se, man, but it gives us a chance to be really competitive. So excited about where we go next. And we'll see with injuries how we come out of this one. But for the most part, learned a lot about our football team tonight.
All right, Sam, and you heard it there. So much to unpack with Coach Mason. And one thing I do appreciate is he kind of lays it on the table. He's no bones about it. Team didn't play well. You were in a tough environment. Tell me your experience firsthand. What's kind of the scene like in Oxford for the Blue Raiders?
I wasn't on site with this one. Our video team gets priority, when our office travels because they physically can't do their jobs there. And I can, do my job remotely some of the time. So this was a trip I don't get to make. I suspect I'll be in Memphis later this month, just because that's a little bit more drivable for those of us who maybe aren't on the team bus necessarily. But from afar and watching on the broadcast with you guys, on the SEC network, very clearly just an opponent that is one of the best teams in the country this year. I'd say bar none at this point. And that showed up on the field. They got a lot of talented guys all over the place on both sides of the ball, particularly in the defensive front and on the edges on offense. And they really let themselves be known early on in that game and sort of put Middle Tennessee behind the eight ball early on, and controlled the pace really the whole time. There was a stretch in the second half where the offense was able to find some success moving the ball up and down the field, which was good to see for sure. But one comment I got from Nicholas Vadiato sort of around the facility today is that this was an Ole Miss team that didn't want Middle Tennessee to score a point, and they wanted to prove a point. And Middle Tennessee was able to get 3 points on the board, which is not ideal. You can't win a game with 3 points most of the time, but given the circumstances, it was a good 3 points to have. And I think avoiding the shutout was a big deal against an Ole Miss team that I think is more likely than not going to be in the college football playoff at the end of the season. So in year one for Derek Mason with 60 newcomers, obviously you'd like to be a little bit further ahead than where they are, but I don't think anyone's really smirking from the loss at this much at that point. They're sort of moving on and knowing that the rest of the schedule is significantly more manageable than what they faced this past weekend in Oxford.
Yeah, I think most of the people that are going to be really upset with this performance are those that had money there in Vegas. We weren't able to cover the spread, which is I think a lot of people's frustration for whatever reason. Personally, when I look back at this game, I saw it as a positive. Really, from the perspective that we were not anything like the Furman game. And I say that Furman's a well-respected opponent. They're an FCS top 10 team, more than likely going to make the FCS playoff. Given the way that we finished the game with Tennessee Tech, I do think that there were some more promising features in this game. As you mentioned, you're going up against an SEC level team. I thought the passing game kind of opened up. I think we found Holden Willis a lot more. I think those are very promising things to see. Miles Butler seems to be a fixture. And even see Cameron Lacey, a guy who I had pitched early in the years as someone that could be very under the radar for this wide receiving core. And he kind of showed why that is. He's very speedy. He's slippery, as I always describe him. He has great hands, a very Richie James-esque ball player. The run game got a little stagnant, something that I was surprised at given week one. I thought that was an emphasis, but the front seven is formidable with the Rebels. They've got quite the transfer portal. Uman Mielen, Walter Nolan, guys like that, they're just tough to run against. And then my second kind of concern is the inability to contain the quarterback. Now, I know Jackson Dart is in a league of his own when we're going to start talking about Heisman hopefuls this year, but we saw last week with Dylan Potts, a guy who's very mobile, who's able to kind of create extra plays with his feet. Dart is very capable of doing that. Obviously, he had great efficiencies completing passes this last week. But the reason that I draw concern to that is because this league has no shortage of mobile quarterbacks that are able to make plays on their feet. I point at Keon Jenkins at FIU this last week, who absolutely blew out Central Michigan in a game that they were underdogs. You've got Hunter Watson, who's now debuted at Sam Houston State, who kind of had a lackluster week 2. But again, a mobile guy that can make plays happen. Of course, we're talking about TJ Finley this upcoming week. Not quite as mobile as the prior two that I listed, but still mobile enough. And the guy threw for 300 yards this last week against Eastern Kentucky. So those are kind of my brief takeaways as things that I hope get addressed this week in practice, especially moving into this big matchup this weekend.
Some of those things I think were circumstantial to that specific matchup. You started off with the run game. I think that had a lot to do with Ole Miss's defensive front, as you noted. That's obviously a very talented group, probably the best group on that defensive core for them is going to be the defensive line. So I'm sure Middle would have liked to run the ball better. But you could also see game plan wise, they knew they were going to have to get out in space, get out to the side a little bit. See on this play from Holden right here that we're watching right now. They did a lot of things like that to be able to move the ball and have some success, particularly in the second half. So that clearly they knew they weren't going to have a ton of success running the ball. And then defensively, I think the reason Jackson Dart had such a good day is Middle really tried to emphasize not giving up huge explosive plays over the top. If you look back at the way the defense is sort of set up and lined up, saw it right there. John House just went straight back on the sprint almost immediately. And that's sort of, they're trying to contain the explosive plays. What ended up happening is Dart took what Middle gave them, which was usually a 10 to 15 yard gain, either handing it off to the running back up the middle or on a pass over the middle where usually there was some space in the coverage, scheme that Middle was running. I think Brian Stewart will scheme up differently for a team that has less explosive weapons than Ole Miss, which is going to be every other team that middle plays the rest of the way. So some of that is circumstantial, but I do think there are some things that they were trying to do that they could do better the rest of the way. I think you need to spread the ball around a little more on offense. We some of the multiple targets was more due to us rotating late in the game. Otherwise, we're tending to target the same guys over and over and over again. Designed a little bit. Obviously, you want to get the ball in your best player's hands for the most part. But one of the team's reasons the offense has had success in recent years in middle has been because they spread it around so much. And so I think you'll have an opportunity to do that this week against Western Kentucky, who are going to do their best to take away your top options like an Amari Kelly, like a Holden Willis. So a guy like Cameron Lacey could continue to have success the way he did this past week as well. So optimistic about that. Optimistic about the defense bouncing back. When they're not having to contain as explosive an offense as Western, not to disrespect Western anyway, they obviously have some offensive success. But what I almost made my kicker to my Sunday sidebar was Middle Tennessee lost by 49 to Ole Miss, and Western Kentucky lost by 63 to Alabama. So on that metric against top 10 teams in their home stadium, the Blue Raiders came out a little better. And I think part of that was a credit to the game plan the staff came up with, and the players' ability to execute it at times on Saturday for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought that was an interesting parallel when you talk about Alabama and Ole Miss, and realistically, I thought we played the better offense personally. And back to the relation to the Furman game, we made Jackson Dart come out for the third quarter. He had to keep his pads on. So I thought there's a few moral victories within the game itself. But I want to move into this Western Kentucky game. I think one of the things that stood out to us, really going into the Ole Miss game, was a little bit of the injury bug on the offensive line. We see some changes there, and even amidst the Ole Miss game, we see some changes there. And then in the tailback room, we've got Peasant goes down, Krettel goes down. I know Krettel made his way back into the game later. I don't know anything if you have anything on Peasant, but I just want to know from an injury bug, you kind of have some insider info potentially for us about where this team stands as far as health going into their first conference game.
I haven't heard anything new today. Obviously, they're off on Monday when we're recording. So by the time you upload this on Tuesday, they'll have their first public practice back, because Sunday practices tends to be closed. So I will try to get some more updates where I can. Just knowing what I know, which is that he was carted off the field and seen on the sidelines in crutches in an air cast on Saturday. Those tend to be red flags that he will not play, particularly this week, but maybe for the foreseeable future. Obviously, something nobody wants to see, particularly after the start of the season. Frank had getting that big touchdown against Tennessee Tech. Frank's been a core of this team ever since I've been here. One of the most blue collar players, I'd say, of anyone this team has. But the good news is that there's some depth behind him if he's unable to go, as I anticipate. And as you mentioned, Jaden Krettel came back, and as far as I know, is going to be fine for this week. Jaquel Middlebrook was banged up a little bit, but is also trending in a good direction, from what I've been told. And then you have Terry Wilkins, who's obviously shown some ability in his time here as well. So I don't think there's going to be a huge drop off if Frank's unable to go in the running back room as far as what the running backs can provide. Obviously, Frank is does a lot of the little things well. I think he's a pretty good blitz pickup, in pass protection. Can be a lead blocker at times. Is actually how he ended up getting hurt on the play. He was a lead blocker and sort of got his legs cut out under him, from what I saw in the replay. But running back, I'm not concerned about. Offensive line, I anticipate Julius Pierce and Jason Bodiford are not going to be back this week, and probably won't be back, anytime soon, based on what I've heard about the severity of the injury. So they're rolling with sort of this revamped offensive line that they've got. I think you listed across. You saw Marcus Miller at left tackle and Simon Wilson at left guard, but Mateo Guevara moves over from right guard to center. He was a guy that I know that Kendall Simmons talked to me about in camp, as somebody that they trusted a lot. And it doesn't surprise me that he got the center nod there, given the trust that he's built on that offensive line room. Then you have Ellis Adams, the Tennessee Tech transfer, getting the nod in Mateo's place at right guard. And then at right tackle, Zach Clayton, true freshman, somebody that's impressed very early for the staff, but is a true freshman. So he's going to have some true freshman moments at times, I suspect, on that line. But clearly a guy that's got a lot of talent and already has some FBS size to him early on in his career. So somebody that you could see make some big jumps as the year goes on. Presuming he stays healthy and continues to play. But definitely a group that continues to need to step up week to week. I know it's a group that has been challenged after that first game. They didn't run the ball they wanted once against Tennessee Tech, where they anticipated they were going to against Tennessee Tech, and I think some of that stemmed from maybe some play selection. They were running against some loaded boxes at times, but also I think the offensive line needs to generate a bigger push at times as well. And starting against Western Kentucky would be a great step for that group collectively to do so. And with a little bit of a new look and some new guys rotating in on that front.
Well, and to carry off of that, one thing about the scouting report when you look at Western Kentucky has been their rush defense. And I know that they've played against Alabama. So even if you take that game out against Eastern Kentucky, they're still allowing roughly 5 yards a carry. So when you're looking at paper, if there was a game for you to kind of get your feet under you, literally and figuratively, in regards to the running game, this might be the week to do that. Again, I think the passing game did open up. My biggest question rolling into this Western Kentucky game is, where is Omari Kelly? Talking all offseason, he was a guy that we were expecting to be the prime target for Vadiato. And again, maybe credit to the opposing defenses for scouting that out. He's only had, I believe it's 3 catches to this point. One of them for a significant gain. You'd have one for negative yards against Ole Miss and one that was a swing pass against Tennessee Tech early on in that competition. But I wish Omari Kelly would make his presence known. Again, maybe it's more of a game planning thing. I don't know. I'm pure speculation on my part. But I throw it back to you here when you look at Western Kentucky game and you see what the Hilltoppers have done in their 2 games. Again, a lot like MTSU. You've got an FCS opponent and you've got one of the top 5 teams in the country. I don't know really where Western Kentucky stands in all of it, other than the fact that their FCS game, they probably performed better, or I wouldn't say probably, they performed better than MTSU did in their respective FCS game. And then as we already touched on, I think MTSU performed better in their road SEC game than Western did. So I still think both teams have a lot of question marks, but where do you see MTSU potentially succeeding this Saturday in Murfreesboro?
With Western, that was one thing I asked Derek Mason at the presser today. It was like, what can you take from film, from 2 opponents that maybe aren't going to show you what they look like in conference play necessarily? And, Western did, put up a goose egg against Eastern Kentucky, had a lot of success defensively against them. But took a while to build up to that 31-0 lead. It was sort of, a lot of 10-0 in the first half. It was maybe 17-0 at halftime and stayed that way most of the second half, as I think Eastern Kentucky had an 11-minute drive at one point in the second half of that game. So they're a little bit tough to read, knowing what, defensive coordinator Tyson Summers likes to run. They tend to like to run a sort of a 3-3 front, which can open up some run lanes in some gap discipline at times. Now, the counter to that is they're able to generate pressure for some unusual angles that teams don't usually get to see regularly when they're sort of running out of that base. So that is something that I'm sure Bodie Reeder and the rest of the offensive staff at middle is focusing in on, is some of the unusual looks that Western can throw at them on that side of the ball, the pressure they have. And, one thing Mason says, it starts with their secondary. So I think, this is a matchup where Middle's going to have to run the ball well to win and have a chance this Saturday. On the Amari Kelly front, primary receivers is a tough job for anybody. I think, the more I play EA Sports football this year now that's come out, the more I find myself realizing that I'm not really throwing to my primary receiver that often in the game, because often, they're guarded by the best, cornerback on the other team. And, it tends to be their routes are the, some of the more complicated ones to run. When he's gotten open a fair amount of times, he had a couple drops in that Ole Miss game that you like to see him haul in, but he did have an 80-plus-yard touchdown called back due to a holding penalty that was nothing of his own accord. That was a great play by him to get open in that space. And they just need to find ways to target him a little bit more. I'd like to see maybe a chance to find him in some space on some screen games, some short passes. Earlier. Use the pass game as a run game. To some extent, might be an option. But this offense is still finding itself. I think it's going to be finding itself well through the month of September until we get into those midweek games when the heart of conference play really starts. And this is a good opportunity for maybe some more cards to be shown than were shown the past 2 weeks. Due to the circumstances, and open up the playbook a little bit as you've gotten more things installed. I anticipate Omari Kelly being fine overall as the year goes on. As just being the number one guy, has its own set of challenges that are different than when you're coming from some other places as well. Defensively for the Blue Raiders, you got to contain TJ Finley. That's going to be number one for them. Obviously TJ had a rough game against Alabama in particular, and had a better bounce back game against Eastern Kentucky. But he's a guy that Coach Mason knows well. Obviously, coached with him at Auburn. When Finley was a player at Auburn, and so they're well aware of his skill set, and particularly the cannon of the arm he has. So it's going to be on the secondary again to make sure that part of his game is contained a little better. And I think if you're making TJ Finley beat you with his legs, you're probably going to be setting up for more success for you long term. It's when he can hit those shots over the top that you tend to get in trouble as a defense. So if you make him run a little bit, not saying that that's ideal, but I think if you're forcing him into those situations, that's not his best card necessarily. And that starts up front. That starts with getting pressure, forcing him off the spot, and that starts in coverage. Make sure there's some coverage sacks as well. So very big challenge for them. Western's always going to have good skill guys. They had never not had good skill guys since I've been here. So I anticipate that remaining the same regardless of who the quarterback is. But got to start up front, and this is a defensive front that is still coming into its own, a lot of new faces, and I know that it's been challenged by the staff as well.
Absolutely. The front seven is an area that I thought we're seeing improvement, but we're still kind of missing those two fixture linebackers that are Drew Francis and Parker Hughes. I know they're sidelined by a little bit of injury. Anything on that front as far as maybe seeing them this week?
I haven't seen them dress out recently. I know they've been practicing a little bit, as far as I know. So good chance they start to ramp up here in the near future. Way back in August, I was told this would be around the time Parker might be ready. And then Drew got nicked up a little bit later in practice. Parker was out, from the start of camp until sort of the very end. So definitely two guys that would help this linebacker room a lot. We talked a little bit in the press conference today about some of the young guys getting chances. Of Marion Bailey, Corey Smith, both true freshmen that they only got some run at those linebacker positions this past week. Guys are going to have to lean on, obviously because Devin Curtis is a guy that's had some success, but obviously has his own injury history at that position as well. So only going to make them deeper, but we'll see if they're ready to go this week. It's going to be a game time decision for both of them, I'm sure.
Great stuff from Sam Doughton as always. Real quick, Sam, before I let you go, opening up as 7.5-point underdogs this week. Back to the Vegas conversation, because that's the only thing anyone ever seems to care about. But I was surprised by that. Where are your thoughts about this upcoming weekend?
I think it says more about where Conference USA is sort of at this point in the season. You're going to talk about it on the roundtable, I'm sure, when you hop on with them. But, this is a league that feels kind of wide open. Liberty does not seem near as strong as they were a year ago. Western and Jack State were sort of considered in that second tier right behind them, have both looked very vulnerable through their first two games compared to where where we thought they would be at the start of the year. In contrast, you got teams like Sam Houston and FIU that are playing better than maybe most folks thought they would early on in the season. And middle, maybe is somewhere in between those two extremes where, they've had some good moments, they've had some not so good moments through two games, and, have, maybe not had the best platform to see who they're going to be. So because things are so wide open, sticking a one score game, on a team that's won the last 5 in a row on the road seems about right to me for what it is. I think one variable people got to keep in mind this week is unfortunately you have Tropical Storm Francine, soon to be Hurricane Francine. It's going to be coming up through the Gulf and likely to affect the weather in the Middle Tennessee area this weekend. It's probably rain predicted for kickoff around 6 p.m. this week. How does that affect things? I mean, it's going to probably have to lean on running the ball a little bit more than you would otherwise do in any other rain game. Going to be a little bit more of a grind fest, in the trenches as well. If that, comes to pass, hopefully the track, pushes it more towards Arkansas, with respect to our Arkansasians that are listening in. But, I think everyone in Murfreesboro would prefer some good weather after the rain we dealt with in the season opener as well. But excited for the game, and I think it will be competitive. I think you have two teams that, are pretty close on paper, given what we've seen through two games for each of them. And so the Vegas line feels about right to me, and it really could swing either way depending on how some of the unanswered questions are answered come Saturday.
A good game is what we all want. I thought that was what we might have this week 3 matchup. I'm very excited to see that come to fruition. Well, Sam, again, I appreciate you stopping by once again on the podcast. I know we're going to have you again on shortly to talk a little bit more on the fall sports in the coming weeks. But your stuff over at GoBlueRaiders.com, I can't encourage people enough. His Sunday notebooks are always extremely helpful for myself on the Raider wrap-up portion at the end of all these episodes. So, Sam, thanks again for stopping by.
One Olympic sport note that just because I'm thinking about right now, Andy Spees, who's our freshman setter for the volleyball team, recorded the first triple double in the program's 25-point era. This past week, she had 11 kills, 38 assists, and 11 digs again in a 5-set win over SEMO. Really big numbers for anybody, but particularly for a freshman. So excited to see her get off to a good start in her Blue Raider career, and some fun things going on over in the AMG, with Chuck Crawford and those guys.
Absolutely, Sam. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Did you know the Blue Raider podcast has an online store? You can now support your favorite podcast by checking out our selection at our website, BlueRaiderPodcast.com. And stay tuned for new merchandise releases as we collaborate with athletes in NIL partnerships.
We take a break in the football discussion to feature our player interview of the week with one of our newest volleyball additions this offseason. She is a graduate middle blocker transferring to the Lady Raiders from Villanova, where she earned 2 All-Big East team selections. From Berlin, PA, we are joined by Kiera Booth. Kiera, how's it going?
Good, thanks.
It's great to see you here. I know you got back all the way from Montana this last weekend. Tell me a little bit about your plane ride there. I know that that's a long one from Nashville to Montana.
Yeah, so we actually went out early. We left on Wednesday, spent 2 days in Yellowstone National Park. So that was stunning. Couldn't ask for a better first trip. But yeah, the travel there was pretty brutal. It was all day, very tired. The altitude definitely got to a lot of us. But yeah, on the way home, it was short connecting flight. Thought we weren't going to make it, but we went right from one plane to the next. So we made it home.
Where was your connection at?
We connected in Minneapolis on the way back, and on the way there, Dallas.
Dallas. Okay. Dallas isn't too awful. I've never been to Minneapolis, but I know that some airports compared to others can be absolutely. I thought maybe you went to Chicago. Chicago's kind of a big one. You can get lost in Chicago. So
yeah, we took the Sky Bridge one too many times because we missed our stop. So that was unfortunate at Dallas.
Well, adds a little adventure to the trip, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So you're from Pennsylvania. Have you ever been out that far west before?
Yeah, I did a road trip last summer to California. Did like a couple of national parks, Zion, Grand Canyon, stuff like that, but never to Montana.
Okay, absolutely. Well, that's very good stuff. Always good to venture out to new places going into your graduate season. But that leads me into my first question to get to know a little bit about you. As I mentioned, you're from Pennsylvania. I believe it's Berlin, as I said. You went to Villanova, which is in south of Philadelphia. I want to know a little bit about you're going into your graduate season. You elect to leave Villanova and you come to MTSU. How did you get your way here? What was that recruiting process like to come to MTSU?
Yeah, so I was offered to stay at Villanova for my 5th year, but my coach at Villanova kind of pushed me to enter the portal, just see what happens. I was like, yeah, I guess I'll stay. We'll see. I didn't really want to take my 5th year. I thought I was kind of done playing. But yeah, so he pushed me into the portal, and next thing I know, like emails kept coming, and I had an original conversation with Jenna, and we had a connection through our club Revolution. So that was kind of cool, just talking about how somebody that knows somebody. The conversation just flowed really well. Kind of felt like I was talking to somebody that I've known forever. Very just like easy to talk to. Yeah, so had a lot of conversations with her and then Chuck, and came on a visit. Next thing you know, yeah, I'm here.
That was my next question. Were you able to make a visit down, and you did? So you got to see the campus. What are kind of some things about the program? Maybe it was something about Coach Crawford or Coach Orner, or maybe some teammates you might have met. What were things that really drew you in here?
Yeah, so actually, funny enough, on my visit, we were under like a tornado watch. We had to take cover, and Chuck, we were like hiding in the locker room, and Chuck was like, yeah, this is my responsibility to like protect you guys. So I thought that was cool to see how he like handled that situation. But yeah, just like hearing the culture that Middle Tennessee volleyball is all about really like excited me, and just how they get after it, how gritty they play, the mentality they have like within their program from teammate to teammate, how like I could step in and just be like, okay, somebody give me feedback and I can take it like easily. It's not so much just very selfish. It's everyone's giving something to somebody. And I thought that was really cool. Something I craved a lot was just like the getting after it culture and how close the girls were. So on my visit, I went with Adri actually to Top Golf, and super cool. It was fun. Went to Puckett's for breakfast. The team was great. They were really welcoming. Couldn't have asked for a better visit. So I think that was definitely the icing on top of the cake.
Well, to learn a little bit about yourself and where you fit into this whole team here, you talked about Adri. We know other upperclassmen like Lau who are going to be quintessential to the success of this team. But you kind of fall in that category now as being one of the older players as a graduate student. This team is filled with freshmen. You got 5 on the roster this year. And when I spoke with Coach Orner, she said a lot of those can make contributions. But I want to hear from your perspective as someone that has been in college a long time. Where do you fit into this puzzle piece as a new person, but two, you're also as someone that has a lot of experience and you're able to take a leadership role against these players?
Yeah, so personally it's just interesting because like you said, I am a fifth year, but coming into this program new and like learning how Coach Crawford just coaches and what he expects out of me is just so different than what I'm used to. So honestly, like I'm learning just with the rest of the freshmen. I just that I've had 4 years of experience under my belt. I think it's interesting where I fall into things is just like being that level-headed person on the court and being that like person that they can look up to at any point in time. Like the leadership role really steps in. I think I have to be more selfless than I've ever been in my career because there are so many young people, especially like Emma, my other fellow middle as a freshman, and just kind of like teaching her the ropes, not just like during the game, but like also mental stuff can be just as important. How to handle like big time swings, stuff like that, like is really important for me to step into that role and just be there for all the rest of my teammates because I've had 4 years of experience. Like I've been in certain situations, and I think that's crucial.
Yeah, the duality of being a student athlete is critical all the time. And people will talk about how hard it is to be an athlete, not with just the travel and the practices and all that. Yourself, as you're integrating into this new team, you're having to learn, I guess, the new philosophy, because volleyball is always volleyball, but there are a lot of philosophies that I'm sure Coach Crawford has. It's different from your time at Villanova. But as you're trying to learn that, you're also trying to be, as you say, a leader for those younger girls and show them, how do you present yourself as an athlete in the classroom as well, because you have to perform there. And that's something that at Villanova, I know you had all Big East academic honors as well. So from that perspective, how are you necessarily teaching the girls? What is it like to be a college student athlete?
Yeah, it's just interesting to hear like because obviously freshman year I was the same way. You don't know how to manage your time quite yet. You're just like, oh my gosh, I'm so stressed. Like I have X, Y, and Z due, but yet we're leaving for Montana the first week. Like, oh my gosh, everything's just like spiraling. So I think just kind of taking little bits at a time and not like I'm just like girls do something little bit each day and you'll be fine. I think that's where I come in to just kind of help everyone not get so tied up in academics so it doesn't carry up onto the court. Because I think sometimes they were like, oh my gosh, I have so much due. I was the same way over the weekend. I was like, I have so much homework to do. But honestly, like it'll get done. It's not about when, it's just it'll get done type of thing. So I think just like prioritizing, just doing a little bit every day is what I do. I stay on top of things. I work ahead, so I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, the procrastination is something that is so hard to break when you go from high
Yeah.
school into college, just as someone that has a little college experience, not nearly the 5 years that you've dealt with. So obviously you've kind of, I would say, I don't want to say perfected, but you've mastered what it takes to do a little bit of both.
Yeah.
But I want to get over to your first weekend. You made the long trip there to Montana. It wasn't the outcome that the Lady Raiders were looking for, but you
Mhm.
had an exceptional week on the Blue Raider podcast. You were our volleyball player of the week last week, 21 kills over the weekend. Tell me a little bit about how do you evaluate your game this past weekend?
Yeah, so for me personally, I had to like step into a role that I'm not necessarily used to. I switched positions midway through Montana State. So I think that was just like taking what coach needed from me and just performing. I don't think I read too much into like how I play. It's just like I go out there and give it my all. Like I don't really get in my head a lot. So when he was like, okay, you're playing right side as a middle, I was like, all right, cool, put me out there. I'm going to get the job done type of thing. So yeah, I was definitely pleased with how I played, but I'm excited to get back into the middle and just work on blocking. Blocking is definitely my biggest thing right now that I need to work on, and just being faster in transition. Helping the younger setters be more comfortable is crucial as well. Having them fit into our system is key to our success. So I think, just like I said earlier, just being that person on the court is definitely something that I was proud of this weekend. Just trying to keep everyone excited, motivated, even when things weren't going good. Like looking somebody in the eye and just being like, okay, like you got the next point type of thing is definitely where I think I did well this weekend. So
there's so many variables that go into traveling for your first road contest and playing a big school like Washington, and then obviously you're playing the host school Montana State this weekend. I know that this is coming out in past tense. You've already performed at the Blue Raider Bash, but this will be your first real game that matters here at the Alumni Gymnasium this upcoming weekend. How do you level with those emotions of it, one being your graduate season, but two being your first real home matchup?
Yeah, just being my first real home game. I have a lot of family coming, some friends from Villanova, so I'm excited to have them here and just supporting me. I always love having my family in the stands. But kind of my mentality going into each game this season is like, this is it for me. So regardless where I am, who I'm playing, like I just need to go into the match and be like, okay, I have got to give it my all, because I don't really. I have looked back on games and been like, dang, like I haven't performed well, or I didn't give it my all, or whatever it may be. So this season, I'm really trying to focus on literally just leaving it all out there. And that's all. If that's all I can do, like that's all I can do. As long as I know that I've left it all out there. At the end of the day, that's pretty much it.
There's so much volleyball that's going to take place this last weekend. Again, as this release, so you've already missed it, Blue Raider fans. But one thing that I think is so special about it is the way the marketing team has tried to get students there. I know that on the Friday matchup, they're giving away to the first 50 students coffee and donuts, just something to get people in the stands and rooting for you guys. I want to know, again, I'm not too familiar with the landscape of volleyball, but versus the Villanova crowds that you may experience versus what you've seen so far with the support system here at MTSU, where I think one thing that gets that MTSU gets a lot of credit for is the amount of energy and effort that they put into their women's programs. Is that something that you've kind of you find is true?
Yeah, I think that's a really special thing, is to just like at Villanova, we had a pretty good men's basketball team. So like obviously that was what they were known for and what they like marketed. But here it's really cool that they put that much effort and energy into each and every sport, especially women's sports, is something that I really value too, because having all these promotions and getting students to the games is just, I mean, it's always better to play in front of people rather than an empty stand. So
Absolutely. Well, before we let you go here, just another little tidbit about you I learned as I was reading through your bio. You're a 1,000-point scorer in basketball. Now you're listed at 6'2". I have to imagine that at some point in conversations, was there ever an opportunity for you to play basketball at college?
100% actually. I think it was going into my senior year, I really had to make that decision of like, okay, what am I going to do? Because I can't keep going back and forth. So junior year, I won states for basketball in high school. And literally that same weekend, I committed to Villanova. So it was like riding out this high of a weekend. So I would go from basketball practice, travel an hour and 45 minutes to club volleyball practice, like right after each other. And it was just getting to be a lot. And I was like, okay, I have to. At that point, I was playing travel basketball too for a club that was also far away. And I was spreading myself too thin. And I think my club really pulled out the joy and just a different side of volleyball that I hadn't seen. So I was like, okay, wait, I actually like this a lot more than I thought. So I had to make the decision to not play basketball my senior year and really just focus on travel volleyball and school volleyball and whatnot, which definitely was not easy, and I miss basketball every day. Honestly, I'm like, I just wish, but I'm happy with where my decision. So
Well, now you're in Murfreesboro, which has an excellent ladies basketball program, as I'm sure you know. Do you think if Rick Insell knocked on your door that you would potentially put on the shoes for your last season?
I mean, why not? Might as
Ab-
well.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you'd be a part of it. I mean, you have a great opportunity to win a ring there as well. But
Yeah.
much like the same with the Lady Raiders, you're part of that upward trajectory that the team is experiencing, and so we look forward to the results from this Blue Raider Bash as well. It's what's coming up to this upcoming conference season for you guys. Kiera, I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy week to join us here today, and I wish you and the Lady Raiders nothing but success for the rest of the way.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
The BRP is proudly partnered with Rivals Network affiliate GoMiddle.com. Subscribe for premium content for all the inside scoop on MTSU athletics, recruiting, or join our free forums to discuss today's episode and all things Blue Raiders. The BRP is also partnered with the College Huddle, a nationwide collaborative effort with over 80 Division I programs represented. Check out the website at thecollegehuddle.com to catch up on all college football content with daily articles and episodes provided by the largest college podcast community on the internet. And our final guest on the Blue Raider podcast, we go behind enemy lines once again to cover our upcoming 100 Miles of Hate week against Western Kentucky. Joining us today is a colleague, partner at the College Huddle, as well as the Conference USA Roundtable. I say friend of the show, but I think this week we're supposed to be enemies of the show. But joining me today is Stephen Moffett of the Topper Talk podcast. Mr. Moffett, how's it going?
Man, I'm good, man. I appreciate you having me on. I always enjoy, getting to sit down and talk, especially 100 Miles of Hate week. So I'm ready.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so much to kind of go over. And if those that haven't been tuning into our CUSA Roundtable, we kind of previewed this episode that's coming out Tuesday morning the next day. I think both of us have a lot of similarities with our early schedule. We both had FCS opponents. We both had SEC top 10 opponents. We both kind of had outcomes that I think we're semi-happy with in regards to the FCS game. I know that you guys had a pretty good start. And then the second half, things kind of fizzled out offensively, but you got your feet back underneath you there in the fourth quarter. And then we all know what happened at Alabama, much like what happened for us at Ole Miss. So tell us a little bit, where do you stand with the program? Where does Tyson Helton stand with the program? Where does Bowling Green stand?
I think, Tyson Helton has been a steady hand. He's a great leader. He's a great, what I call program manager. I'm not going to liken him to, Rick Stockstill of yesteryear for you all, but, he's consistently going to win 7, 8, 9 games, be in the hunt for that conference championship. He fields a competitive team. We have a good offense. He recruits good players. We get good players out of the portal. So it's exciting every year. So we're in that hunt. We could be in a much worse place year in and year out. So I think, Bowling Green is happy with where we are, but we want that conference championship that's eluded us now since, 2016. As far as this year goes, I mean, obviously that game at Alabama, we hope to go in there and be competitive, at least for a half of football, maybe keep it close. And then, once that second half kicks in and the depth of the talent really starts to show its head, you expect they're going to pull away. But, we had a couple early turnovers, some interceptions that stalled some movement on offense for us. We took some fourth down gambles. And quite frankly, Alabama was just Alabama. As I was walking into the stadium, I was talking to some fans, and several of them asked me, are you all going to cover the spread? It was opened at 31. It was 35 at kickoff. And my answer to him was, I don't know. You tell me. How many points does Kalen DeBoer want to score? Because I think if he wants to score 40, 50, 60, I think that's what he's going to do. Because I think as the first game of his era, replacing, a living legend, he wanted to put on a show and say, hey, I'm here now. This is what to expect. And that's exactly what he did. He kept the foot on the gas for the entirety of the game. Can't blame him for running up the score. We didn't stop him. That's what it's all about. We knew that they were a good team. They were talented, and they scored a lot of points. We didn't score any. So there were a lot of question marks coming out of that game. And then the game with EKU this past Saturday, obviously there was a lot of, fanfare and drama surrounding the whiteout and white uniforms. And, it's a historic rival. back to our OVC days. Obviously, we've since moved up to FBS, but I still like having that sort of a game, in-state rival, quote unquote, on the schedule. But we took care of business on the field, a 31-0 victory. There are still some people in the fans that are questioning the offense or the starting quarterback, etc. But I feel really good about how we played and how the game played out. I think we showed just enough to beat EKU. I don't think we wanted to show our hand coming into a conference matchup, the very next week. So, I really think we played a watered down, simple version of that game just to get through it. Got through it relatively healthy. Both of those games. I think a couple guys got some dings, and we haven't heard updates on them. But similar to what you said, with the SEC and the FCS matchups, it turned out how you expected for both of them. And obviously, I think there's still room to grow for us. And hopefully, we continue to take that step forward coming into this game.
Yeah, you touched on it there at the end, talking about the TJ Finley of it all, the new Texas State transfer quarterback. He had a lot of bright spots this last week, and then as you touched on with the Alabama game, just wasn't what you expected it to be. And now, how much of a product is that? Is Alabama? Who's to say? But he had a great week last week against Eastern Kentucky, and you also touched on maybe having a watered down offensive approach against Eastern Kentucky. And MTSU, for the likes of myself, I like to speculate that MTSU also gave a watered-down version against Tennessee Tech, which is why we jumped out to a 21-0 lead, and then we didn't have to score a touchdown until the last drive of the game. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that's what happened to us, as you're saying for yourself. So tell me a little bit about TJ Finley, his game that you've seen in live action now in a Hilltopper uniform, as well as the offense in general. You say you see a watered-down version. What's kind of what do you see as the full growth that is the offense that we may see this Saturday?
I think the game versus Alabama, he threw two bad throws that were turned into interceptions and turnovers. But they really kept him moving. They were hitting him. They were keeping him off his spot, making him make quick decisions that turned into bad decisions. He didn't make it to halftime. They pulled him, put Caden Veltkamp in, which I think is a smart decision with how that game flow was going. I think at the time it was 35-0. If Caden was going to lead us from behind like he did versus ODU, that's the time to put him in, I guess, right? So, then this game versus EKU, even during the game, he had at one point he was over 250 yards, one touchdown, and like a 71 completion percentage. And I still had people text me like, "Man, I don't know if this is the guy." And I'm like, he ends up with 350 yards passing. I think right around 70% completions, just one touchdown. I think, or maybe it was two, ended up being two. But I think we're just so spoiled to, the Austin Reeds and Bailey Zappies and just the lineage we've had for the last 10 years. You're used to seeing 3, 4, 5, 6 touchdowns. You're used to seeing 50, 60 points on the regular, especially against that caliber of an opponent. I think TJ was solid. You definitely could see him start to get more comfortable in the offense. Keyshawn Johnson, they had a really good connection. He finished with over 100-yard receiving. Musa Berry is a solid target for him, but TJ Finley is definitely settling into the offense. He's getting comfortable. He's big. He's athletic. One of his best throws of the night didn't go for a completion, but it was a back corner fade to the end zone to Easton Messer. He was out of bounds when he caught it, but I mean, it was a beautiful throw, drop in the bucket. It was a professional caliber throw. Maybe it wasn't hauled in, it wasn't caught, it didn't go on the stat sheet, but when I saw it, I was just like, that's a professional throw. And if that's what we have on our offense, leading our offense for the rest of the year, I'm happy for it. I'm excited for it. I know in the complete fan base, the jury may still be out. There's going to be people that aren't happy because it's not the local kid. It's not Caden Veltkamp, who I also think will be a good quarterback, someday for us. But it's just not today. I think TJ Finley has shown his leadership, his athleticism, the throws he can make. And I look forward to him continuing to get more comfortable in this offense and with the receivers that we have, because we have a lot of receivers for him to choose from.
And talk about that a little bit. You're having to replace one of your top wide receiving threats you've had in a while with Malachi Corley, quite the athlete that he is. And then your backfield, you pick up a new transfer. I had speculated you might have a running back by committee, but you're pretty adamant that it's Elijah Young's year going into this year. So talk about some of those skill guys that Finley has to give the ball to.
You know, one of my favorite targets that he has is Elijah Young, who's our starting running back, transferred last year from Missouri. Was kind of part of a 3-4 headed monster, but separated himself as the lead dog last year, and he's really versatile in the running game and passing game. And then with our receivers, I mean, Keyshawn Johnson transferred from Alabama State. He's solid. Dalvin Smith, he's been with us for 3+ years now. Easton Messer, Katie Hutchison, Musa Berry, River Helms. I mean, the list just goes on. I think both games we've had so far, we've spread out to 9 or 10 receivers. There's just a lot of talent on that side of the ball. Last year, we went through a lot of injury concerns, but this year, so far, knock on wood, offensive wise, we're healthy, and I think that the way that Tyson likes to spread the offense out, spread the field out, give guys room to make a catch and then make a play after the reception, is really going to lend itself to TJ Finley's strengths of being a really accurate passer. Over 70% last year at Texas State. We saw, right at 70% this last weekend versus EKU. If you can keep him clean in the pocket, he's going to, quite frankly, going to pick you apart. And if you do shut things down the field, he's going to take off running. He's shown he can do that at times. He doesn't do it a lot, but if the secondary's coverage is solid, he will take off. So just a lot of weapons, a lot of different options, some mostly familiar names, but Keyshawn Johnson is the one I definitely have to highlight that, keep an eye on him, circle him. He's a guy that's going to make a lot of plays for us.
And on the flip side, talk about the defense there. The one area that I know that you've talked about Hilltoppers need to improve on is that rush defense. They have a good size up front, but you're not necessarily seeing that run stopping formidable front that you'd like to see. In Conference USA, it's not necessarily a necessity to have a strong front seven because it is quite the passing league, especially at the top of the conference. But that's been kind of the area of weakness for the Hilltoppers in these first 2 weeks is the run defense.
Yeah, and even looking back further than that, it was a weakness of ours last year. It was probably the biggest weakness of our defense was just getting off the field. On third downs when you knew teams were in third and short, and you knew they were going to run the ball. Especially mobile quarterbacks. Secondary wise, I feel like we can cover up a lot of passing plays and schemes, but if you're a good rushing team and you can consistently hand the ball off and create good lanes and good gaps for your runners, be it the running back or your quarterback. I mean, I think it makes it a long day for us because we haven't proven that we can consistently stop it. Now we'll do it at times. We bowed up a couple times down near the goal line against EKU and left them with no points. So it definitely is a question mark. It's something that I would like to see us take a step forward. Defensive coordinator Tyson Summers has been really solid over his years here, so I trust him to get that side of the ball right. But it is the biggest concern on the defensive side of the ball is that run defense.
That's great stuff from Steven as always when he talks about his Hilltoppers. Before I let you go, the game line opens up at 7.5, a touchdown favorite for the Hilltoppers on the road here in Murfreesboro. I want to hear from you. I think that from my perspective, that's a respectable touchdown favorite. I think that's a fair assessment of where these two teams sit right now. I'd love to hear from your unbiased perspective. How do you see this weekend folding?
Yeah, it's going to be hard to take off my red glasses. I think I shared earlier how long it's been on the Conference USA Roundtable, how long it's been since Middle has beaten us in football since November 2nd in 2018. What, 2,100 days, 2,138 days. So it's been a while. But we've been a really consistent and solid team under the leadership of Tyson Helton. Like I said earlier, he's always fielded a competitive team, a team that can win conference, but we just have had a greater team in our way. So I feel really good about this year's matchup, and that's not really any slight to Middle Tennessee or Derek Mason or just the team there, because I think the change of leadership there was needed. That breath of energy, that new life that has been brought into Murfreesboro and into the program and on campus, and just from the outside, not having been to Murfreesboro yet, I can see it just on social media that there's definitely new life leading that program. And I think that this rivalry being good and being better and competitive every single year is better for the conference as a whole. Now, that being said, I think we've dominated the rivalry for the last 5 years. We've won 8 of the last 10. I'm not ready to give that title up. I think that we should win this game. I think that we can and will win this game. But you did mention on the CUSA Roundtable that weather could be a factor. It could be a little rainy, could be wet. If that slows down the passing game and makes this just a muddy slugfest on the ground, a battle of rushing teams. Granted, we can rush the ball, but it's not what we like to lean on. It's not our strength by any means. We can do it, and we have athletes and several running backs we can rotate in and out. But my concern would be on the other side of the ball is, can we stop you all from running the ball consistently? Because if we're playing from behind and it's raining and we can't throw the ball, we have to run the ball. Game flow is definitely going to come into play with both of our teams. We want to jump out to an early lead and make you all have to pass the ball. You have a dynamic quarterback that can run and throw the ball really well. But we think that our strength is in our secondary. So, I think Western wins this game. I think it's going to be a battle. I don't think it's going to be, a 2 or 3 touchdown win. I think it's going to be, a 7 to 10 point victory, maybe in that, 32 to 24 type of a score finish. Could come down to whoever has the ball last. We've seen that several times over the last 10 years, is that, we've had a lot of close games, a lot of one score games, a lot of overtime games. The last few years haven't been that, but the renewed leadership and the energy and just your program, taking a step the right direction, I think is going to make this game competitive and should be a fun one for everybody involved, no matter who wins or loses.
That was a 15-minute conversation there. Probably the most tame one you're going to see between a Blue Raider and a Hilltopper this week on social media. But I'm very thankful that Steven was able to stop by. Again, we collaborate over at the College Huddle, so check out all of our stuff throughout the years. We collaborate with other College Huddle podcasters, as well as the CUSA Roundtable. Our episode released last night. If you want to catch the next one, that'll be live streamed on the Blue Raider podcast actually in 2 weeks. So look forward to that episode. But to what's at hand, Steven, I appreciate you again for coming on. Look forward to you hopefully making the trip down to Murfreesboro. I know that you might have some predisposed issues, or I say issues, but more or less you'll be helping with the Honeydews this weekend. So hopefully you make it down to Murfreesboro, and of course make your stop over to Toots like you always do.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you for having me, Jake. Hopefully I'll get to link up and see you down there.
Absolutely. See you, Steven.
Sir, see you.
Thanks for sticking around all the way to the Raider wrap-up portion of the episode, where we will review this last week in Blue Raider athletics, as well as look ahead to what's to come this upcoming week. As we spent a lot of time on today's episode talking about football, the Raiders dropped their 52-3 road contest in Oxford, Mississippi to the 6th-ranked Ole Miss Rebels. I give my player of the game to Holden Willis with 6 catches for 93 yards. I think if anyone listened on the SEC Network like I did, the broadcasting team raved about Willis for good reasons. I thought Bodie Reeder did a great job as far as implementing him into the game plan. And I look forward to next week's episode, where we will actually sit down with Holden Willis and talk about his game at Ole Miss prior to the Western Kentucky game. Unfortunately, can't time those things quite right, given the difficulty with game weekends, as well as Holden being a student athlete. But still, exciting conversation to come next week, so keep your eyes peeled for that, as well as the Western Kentucky game that is happening this Saturday. Kickoff is set for 6 p.m., and it is my understanding that the Party in the Grove, that was such a huge success in Week 1, albeit with the lightning delay that we had, it will also begin at 3 p.m. on Saturday. So I am excited to see all those faces out there at Party in the Grove for a big 100 Miles of Hate matchup this weekend. Women's soccer, they go 1-1 this week. They have a big win in their midweek game against Alabama A&M down in Huntsville by a score of 5-0. Yana Yordanova, as well as Mana Labarji, both get 2 goals in that matchup, but I give my player of the week to Yana with her 2 goals against the Bulldogs. And then the Lady Raiders dropped their weekend contest in Nashville to Vanderbilt by a score of 3-0. And they will wrap up their non-conference season this Thursday night back at home at the Dean Hayes Soccer Stadium and Track Stadium against the Jaguars. That is to kick off at 7 p.m. this Thursday night. Lady Raiders volleyball finally made it back home after their trip to Montana. They go 2 for 2 on the week, dropping their contest to Lehigh 2-3 on Friday, and then they got a come-from-behind victory against Southeast Missouri State, winning the final 3 sets to take that one from underneath the Redhawks' nose. They sweep Austin Peay 3-0, and then they drop their final contest on Sunday against Arkansas State 0-3. As Sam had teased early in the episode, Player of the Week Andy Speas goes with 11 kills, 38 assists, 11 digs against SEMO. Triple-double, the first one in program history. Absolutely fantastic showing from her. And again, it was crucial in that SEMO game as we were on the brink of going 0-4 to start the year, but with 3 straight set victories gets us that first elusive win on the season. So big congrats to Andy. And as young as she is as a freshman, exciting to see what she's capable of doing within the Lady Raiders program. But it doesn't stop there. Upcoming, they will go to Charleston. I have that miswritten there, but they will go to Charleston, where they will College Charleston is the host. They will face Utah Tech and Robert Morris on Friday with a 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. start time respectively. And then they will face the host school, College of Charleston, on Saturday the 14th at 6 p.m. At the time of this recording, we've got golf currently in Louisiana at the Argent Financial Classic. They are only 2 rounds down of 3, so this is as up-to-date as I can possibly get to you this Tuesday morning. The team is sitting at 9 strokes over par, which is good enough for tied for 10th in a very tight race of amongst 18 teams. I believe they only have a few strokes. If I'm not correct, I'll look myself. Yeah, they're only 3 strokes out of 6th place, so a lot of movement that can happen within this last third day that's going on today. So keep your eyes peeled there, especially on top man JJ Zimmer, who's tied for 5th right now at 4 strokes under par. Also want to highlight tied for 44th is Sheldon McKnight and Carter Maneth, both at 4 over. Marcus Varjan is just 1 stroke off, tied for 53rd at 5 over. And Owen Queen are tied at 69th at 7 strokes over. Again, to keep you up to date for this upcoming weekend, the men's golf team will be in Cincinnati taking a part of the Bearcat Invitational that begins Monday to Tuesday. So we'll also have to give you a little check-in there, as well as give you the final conclusion of this week's Argent Financial Classic in Louisiana. Similar situation up in Lexington, as the Lady Raiders golf team is taking part in Coach Walmsley's very first contest at the Betty Lou Evans Invitational. Team had a very slow start in round 1, which has put them into 9th place out of 11 teams, sitting at 37 strokes over par. Kendall Maynor is the lone bright spot as she sits at tied for 20th at 1 stroke over par. She had, again, a relatively slow round in round 1, but had a great, excellent under par round in round 2 that's gotten her there in the top 20. Lainey Campbell at 7 over par has her tied for 27th. Jillian Bowman, competing as an individual, is tied at 44th at 10 over. Young phenom Ella Manley had a much better second round compared to her first round, puts her up at tied for 54th at 15 over par. And then freshman Caroline Pardue, the PCA product, at tied for 57th at 16 over par as a part of her first collegiate rounds of golf. And then tied for 57th along with Pardue is Nicole Johnson, who is at 16 over par as well. This upcoming weekend, the Lady Raiders will be in Louisville, staying in Kentucky with the Cardinal Cup. That actually will begin on Friday and conclude Sunday. So we will have a full recap of the Betty Lou Evans Invitational as well as the Cardinal Cup in next week's edition of the Raider Wrap-Up. Men's and women's tennis both took part in their Wally Tidwell Pro-Am to kick off their fall season. I have on the YouTube version, for those that are watching the visual presentation, Andre Horak and Barry Owens are winners from the men's portion of it. And then on the women's side, we got Caroline Hawk, Karen Adams, Coco LaLance, and Gershon Stice. So congratulations to those winners, and a great send-off to both tennis programs as they start their season upcoming. The men will actually be at home as they host the Blue Raider Invite, and that will begin on Friday and roll all the way to Sunday. And then the women, not going too far off, they'll be in Nashville as a part of the Belmont Lipscomb Invitational, also rolling from Friday to Sunday. So I look forward to seeing those programs, those teams with their new faces this upcoming fall as they kick that off this weekend. And then finally, the track and field team, or I should say cross-country team, is back in action this weekend in Huntsville, Alabama, as a part of the Southern Showcase that is hosted by Jacksonville State. That will do it for the Raider wrap-up portion of the episode. I appreciate everyone for sticking around this long. As I already teased, keep your eyes peeled for next week as we will go over our reaction from the 100 Miles of Hate, beginning with a newcomer to the show, but not a newcomer to you Blue Raider fans. We'll have Chip Walters on the show on next Tuesday to talk about Western Kentucky and the outcome of the 100 Miles of Hate. As I already teased, we'll have Holden Willis on to talk about his season, his final season here in Murfreesboro, as he's a fixture on that offense as a receiving tight end. And then lastly, we will wrap things up and look ahead to another non-conference matchup with Duke here in Murfreesboro. We will have the Bull City coordinators and another fellow partner with College Huddle that is going to come on and talk about the Blue Devils game, as well as talk to us a little bit about Manny Diaz and what he brings to the table for the Bulls there in Durham. So exciting episode for you next week. Again, thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to follow us on all of our socials. If you want to support the show, the best way to do it is to check out our website, as well as check out our merchandise website over at BlueRaiderPodcast.com. Don't forget to like this video. Don't forget to subscribe wherever it is you're listening to on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. And we will catch you again next week. And until then, go Blue.